Hello and welcome to AIM North America's Pharmaceutical Webinar Series. I'm Mike Ellen and I serve AIM as their Member Engagement Manager. AIM North America is an alliance enabling the cooperation, development, standardization of AIDC technologies. From barcodes to RFID to IoT, AIM North America is your advocate. Any organization with an interest in data collection is a beneficiary of these efforts. Membership provides an opportunity to influence the direction of the industry, develop policies and standards, access market reports, and engage new partners. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to go over. On this slide, you'll see our antitrust policy. It's the policy of AIM Inc. to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. And then our collaboration and work product policy states that committee meetings and presentations are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM's developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. You will also notice that you are muted. You'll be muted throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, you can send those to me through the Q&A option, which is located at the bottom of your application screen. We'll answer questions at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar will be recorded and you will be emailed when it is available. Today, I'm here with Steve Statler, Senior Vice President at Wiliot. Steve will be discussing the next generation of IoT smart labels in healthcare. Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone that's connected for this session. I'm conscious that we're a community of fellow travelers trying to solve a lot of the same problems. And what Wiliot does is, I'll go back to my first slide, we're focused on bringing intelligence to everyday things using a smart label technology that I'll revisit briefly for those that don't know us. Our business model is sensing as a service, and what we do is really very dependent on a broad IoT ecosystem, and we stand on the shoulders of a lot of the work that's been done by many of the people on this call. So my goal for this session is to give our perspective on what is a really important vertical. Healthcare is a market area that many of us have gravitated to because the problems are large. The importance is very significant. And so what I plan to do in this presentation is give a readout on our perspective on the use of smart labeling technology and the cloud services that enable those labels to be smart on a variety of use cases. What we've learned, what we're seeing, and I'm hoping that this can be of interest and of use to those of you who are fellow travelers in this space. So what we do is really thanks to our investors. We have a number of financial investors, strategic investors that inform what we do. M Ventures is the venture arm of Merck, the German pharmaceutical company. We work with Amazon, who inform us on many levels. PepsiCo, one of the largest CPG companies, Verizon and Docomo on the connectivity side, Maersk on the supply chain side. And part of what we're doing is to try and pursue this vision of an internet of everyday things. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, then we look at true IoT technology, connectivity and intelligence is really been focused on the internet of expensive things. So you see the items on the right, and there's billions of them, and we've achieved a lot in connecting them to the internet. But the real opportunity is on the right, connecting the food products, medicine, supplies, where the volume is in trillions, and the impact on the way we live our lives, on how efficient we can be, how effective we can be, is much more significant. So we come at this with a business model where we sell sensing as a service, cloud services. But all of that is anchored on these smart stickers, IoT stickers, in a disposable form factor that can work together to give insights that weren't possible before. The stickers themselves have no batteries. They don't rely on expensive scanners. They work with devices like smart speakers, Wi-Fi access points, micro gateways, phones. And what you'll be seeing over the course of the next few months is also very low-cost energizer devices that use commodity radios. So these devices will cost of the order of $10, $20 that can provide LoRa and other kinds of Bluetooth energy to energize tags that talk to the cloud via these devices. And what we do is we're focusing on access control, privacy, sensing, and the flow control that will allow a hospital with potentially millions of tags to have a view of where doctors, patients, equipment, supplies, medicine is, and to also extend that architecture forwards and backwards in the supply chain. So I've been talking about sensing, and so you get a sense of the senses that we're working on at the moment. Wiliot is just in a transition between our version 1 product and our version 2 product. And one of the things that we've been working on is this, which is a proximity sensor. And you can see that when the person's finger comes in proximity with the tag, we get a readout on our dashboard and we can sense that proximity. And this, we think, is going to be useful for measuring engagement, usage, maybe even adherence. We're starting to use tags as high water, low water marks to detect consumption. We're applying them to plastic crates as a way of scaling and sensing large amounts of produce, items of all kinds. And we're seeing the ability to sense whether those crates are full or empty, but also, as in this case, the change of products over time. So the water content is changing as these zucchinis are aging, and we can actually detect that. And the other thing that we're seeing is there's a wisdom of the crowd. You have a certain level of temperature accuracy from sensors at the bottom here. Individually, when you aggregate them, you can have much, much higher levels of accuracy than would be possible even with a highly calibrated, very expensive sensor. So that's fairly generic. One more generic slide, and then we'll get into the healthcare area. We believe that if we're going to take this IoT world to achieve its potential to have connected everyday things, this is going to require a platform approach, which is different to what's been taken in the past. There's a whole range of use cases here throughout the life of a product, through manufacturing, distribution, the retail or and home environment, and then in the recycling space. And what we see is, up until now, a lot of the use cases and ROI calculations for these smart labels has been based on 1 or 2 use cases. And it's logical to do that. But in our opinion, this is like having an app store with 1 or 2 apps. It just doesn't make sense. It's hard to get critical mass. The only way this really scales, the only way that people are willing to invest what it will take to put intelligence into everyday things, is if you can amortize the costs of that throughout the life of a product. And if you really do that, the impact can be quite profound. So what does this mean to the pharma and healthcare worlds? We're seeing a definite sweet spot here. It's one of our primary areas of focus and probably true for a lot of you as well. We see the sweet spots in authentication. Is this medicine real? The underlying serialization process that's required to meet regulatory requirements and really understand people's usage of products and the condition of products. Opportunities to look at adherence to prescription regimens, use of the products. And in particular, we're seeing a great opportunity around consignment deliveries, where increasingly clinics and hospitals are not taking ownership of the products that are delivered to them until they're actually used, until a nurse takes the medicine or the appliance out of a cupboard. And even then, there's a trend to that ownership being fleeting, being passed on to the patient or to the insurance company. And we believe that smart labeling has a great role to play in reducing the costs for a hospital stay by streamlining that and making sure that things don't disappear and that there isn't a financial burden on the venues that are enabling the use of these products. So many use cases throughout the life of a product. These are the ones that I'm going to be focusing on for the rest of this session. But there's an overall pattern which we call demand chain. We didn't invent that term, but it's an evolution of supply chain. It's a supply chain that's a lot leaner, a lot more responsive, getting the right products to the right place. And the difference between supply chain and demand chain is characterized by two main things, in our opinion. One is a continuous view of where everything is, rather than just a snapshot that has been facilitated by a handheld scanner. So more fixed readers, more telematics devices looking at where things are. And then the second important thing is demand signals. So what is a demand signal? It's procurement of something. It's the use of something. It's taking something from the cupboard in a hospital or a clinic. It's the consumption of a product by a patient or in the home. And we believe that if you can harness those two things, then there's huge savings that can be made, and there's much greater efficacy of the products in question. So the baseline for all of this is more efficient supply chains. You can get different numbers from different management consultants, but anywhere between 2, 5, 10, or 20% efficiencies, if you can really start to know where everything is in that supply chain, plus the need to do it in order to satisfy some of the regulatory prescriptions that are coming down the line and starting to come into effect. So I'm going to skim through this video. There's many videos that I want to show you, but this is an example of a project. It's actually in a pharmacy where Wiliot is a partner of ours who have conventional battery-powered beacon technologies, but wanted to use the smart tag label IoT stickers to start to get a real-time view of where those containers are that contain pills. So up until now, they were trying to use these bulky Bluetooth beacons, which I've spent a lot of my career working with. But applying a sticker means that you can actually use existing containers and the existing automatic dispensing machines and deal with the issues that are inevitable whenever you get robotics involved in managing assets, which is what happens when the robots lose control. And the reality is not all of the containers are in that machine. They're spread around the pharmacy. And so the idea is that these containers of pills are located both within that BD dispenser, but also throughout the area where this work is being done. So that use of trilateration to give an X and a Y on where things are, we believe is kind of the baseline. And it's a baseline that still, there's many requirements to move towards. So we don't take it for granted. But the other use case, which we see as a logical extension as you start to tag more and more things, is the ability to detect gray market diversion, where real products are being used where they shouldn't be. And this, the opportunity to address unlicensed sale and usage of products is very significant. Cold chain is another progression, not something new in itself. There's many solutions out there where large containers, shipping containers of products are being monitored for location and temperature. But the opportunity that we see is taking this down to the item level, so that when products are left on a shelf or a loading dock and temperature compliance is breached, we can detect it. Now, whether people really want to know that issue has occurred is another point of contention. Very often, ignorance is bliss. But overall, I'm optimistic that we do want to know when medicine is effective and when it isn't, and when things went wrong. And that's one of the reasons why we engaged in this project, which is something that we did with a number of partners. We worked with Verizon on connectivity. We worked with Avery Dennison's Atma and the Cloudleaf team on the application side, and a number of converters to create a vaccine vial for one of the major pharmaceutical companies that could track the temperature of the vial in real time. And here you can see a pizza box of vials being tracked and traced. The pizza box is being measured. The temperature of the vials is being measured. And here what we're seeing is dilution. So vial 21 just moved from non-diluted to diluted. We detected a frequency shift with the tag. There's a smart gateway you can see on the desk there that's reading those labels. And that then allows us to understand whether the medicine is good to use, or whether you're having something put into your arm that either has been out of temperature compliance or has not been diluted. And we can also start to get into tracking the disposal. We can use AR to interrogate the labels and pull the data from the cloud to understand what's the state of the item is. So the consignment management, I've already spoken to, so I won't go into that, but significant ROI given that product is being lost. And if we can improve on this area, I think there's a lot of savings to be made, as well as financial efficiencies. So this is another example of using AR. So on the left, you'll see there's actually an image from my phone, and there's some tags that we've got, in this case on some razor blades, but it could be a pill bottle. We are recognizing the pill bottle, we're recognizing the razor blade with machine vision. And then what we're doing is allowing the user to tap on that image, and the cloud data is pulled down, and we get not only the item level information about when this product was made, its distribution path, but we also get temperature history. So this is an example of the way consumers could be provided a way of interacting with with medicine, with medical products, could be a knee brace, where we can give advice on how to use it. There's maybe less of a problem in this country, but around the world, huge problems with counterfeit medicines. And so having a smart tag with security embedded, encryption as a default, allows us to authenticate what's real and what isn't, and potentially we can save many lives that way. And then one of the things that never ceases to amaze me is the challenges that we have around the fact that people don't take their medicine. And so we have Nobel laureates inventing these drugs, and efficacy is significantly reduced, not because the drug doesn't work, because we're not taking it. Very often for very human reasons, we forget. So one of the projects that we're working on in this space, and this is an animated illustration of the use case from CCL. But the concept here is smart labels on auto injectors. So yes, we can do the cold chain. We can know that the insulin is been kept at the right temperature. We can make sure that it is the right temperature level to administer it. But then by measuring the position of the plunger, we can see whether the auto injector has been fired or not. And then, that's obviously a critical piece of information. If we're going to look at outcomes, see the outcomes are not where they are, is it because the medicine's not working, or is it because the medicine just hasn't been taken? So if we can start to look at adherence, we can also start to look at auto replenishment. And what we see is an immense reward for companies if you can move from being a supplier of one-off deliveries of medicine, and you can become a Netflix of medicine. If people can subscribe and you can start to measure their consumption, then the valuations of companies that adopt that model are going to be significantly higher. Wall Street rewards subscription business models. And so auto replenishment is a key part of that. This video illustrates some of the building blocks that enable that. So you can see a number of containers. We've got calcium tablets on the left. We've got some Advil in the third container. And what we're measuring is two things here. One is interaction. So the calcium was picked up, and we can see there's some interaction with the bottle or the vial, pill vial. And what we'll see is that the Advil, which has been full, you can see it's registered as being 90% full. We're starting to remove the contents of that, put the cap back on, put it back in place, and then we'll register, it goes from 90% and indicates the container is empty. The container on the right, we're doing temperature measurement. That was a cooler block that we were using there to reduce the temperature from room temperature down to 17 degrees. And then lastly, you've taken your medicine. What do we do about disposing what's not been used? And this is a huge issue. And we see it not just in medicine, we see it in verticals like apparel as well. And we're starting to, in the early stages of work with consortia that are trying to address that with smart collection and sorting, using automation to detect what used medicine is, so that we can know how to dispose of it correctly. So many use cases. We think this will really gain momentum as we start to get more and more default enablement of the smart speakers, the Wi-Fi access points that provide the infrastructure to read the smart labels that are already there. We think the key is multiple use cases that can build on each other so that the ROI is the aggregate. So we have the App Store model than the one-off standalone business case. So I hope you've found this interesting. I've tried to give a sense of where we are as we progress through the controlled release of our product. A lot of what I've shown is building on a lot of work from many other companies, and I'm sure there's going to be many other companies working on doing what we're doing as well. I'm very excited about the direction that the industry is taking in this space, and would welcome the chance to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for your time and knowledge today. This leads us obviously now to our Q&A session. As I ask some of those questions we received, just note you still have time to ask a question by chatting them to me using the chat dialog box at the bottom of your screen. So the first question that I have, Steve, is obviously these tags monitoring temperatures could be used in other markets outside of healthcare. Is that something you plan on doing? And if so, are there any adjustments that would need to be made to the product?
Absolutely. What we're building is a horizontal platform. It's really our partners that are building the vertical applications. That said, you have to focus, because even when you have partners doing vertical applications, it drives a set of requirements in terms of the tag form factors, the antenna designs, the compliance standards, regulatory standards, and so forth. But the short answer is yes, we see food as being a very an adjacent market that's also going through regulatory drivers for very similar things around authenticity, around traceability, recall management. So we are using a lot of the same elements there. And we see more generally, more generically, looking at supply chain for consumer packaged goods in retail environments, and probably initially focusing more on reusable plastic crates, RPCs, reusable transport items, smart shelving, so that brands can start to get real-time visibility in the store of inventory levels, which is something that they've previously been blind to. And we believe if a brand can know what the inventory levels are, whether it's in a Walmart, a CVS, or in a hospital, then they can potentially make 10, 20% less product, but sell more of what they've made, keep the products fresh, and waste less. And so these patterns work across many industries, but clearly healthcare is one of the key ones that we see driving this because of the costs and the problems, the opportunities there.
Okay, great. Another question we have is, what about using EBeacons as part of the process?
I'm not really familiar with what is meant by an EBeacon.
Okay, I'll just see if they can clarify that here. Another question we have, and we'll go back to that one later if we get some more clarification, is how does the energy harvest of waves affect the specific wavelength or frequency?
Kind of a lot that you could say about that. So, the frequencies that you harvest from are very significant. So we harvest from 2.4 gigahertz by default, but we'll be launching in a matter of weeks, small number of months, a multi-band tag that harvests also from sub-gigahertz, from 915. So we'll actually be able to recycle RFID, LoRa, number of other energy sources that may be present. Those LoRa is starting to appear in the home in a number of smart speakers, security cameras. So part of what we do is think of strategies about where we get the energy from. We then, need to look at the impact of the materials that the tags go on, because they shift the frequencies that you harvest and broadcast on. And that's one of the friction areas. It's why we have to choose and select which use cases we work on first, because similar to the generic UHF RFID industry, there's different tags that get developed for different materials that deal with different frequency shifts based on those materials. So I hope that addressed the question.
Yeah, another question kind of going along with that is what, if any, are the environmental implications of these tags? Is it essentially negligible compared to the impact of the package, like the vial, the bottle, the auto injector itself?
I think it's very positive in the aggregate. So yes, it's a very small piece of silicon, roughly 1 millimeter in size at the moment and getting smaller. It's a microscopic amount of glue. There's some copper and aluminum in the antenna. It's very similar to RFID, and our partners at Avery Dennison have been doing a lot of work on recyclability of those. But I think this is, it's a little bit about like arguing about the environmental sustainability of the manufacturing process of electric cars. There's things that can be done to improve that, but the more general impact of reducing what you make by 20% and wasting 20% less. So there's 40% of the food that we produce is thrown away by consumers. So if we can harness the power of internet connectivity and start to get visibility of people's adherence to medicine and consumption of food, and have more durable clothing that isn't thrown away because it's only worn once, the environmental impact is enormous. And I really believe that as an industry, we can make a huge difference to climate change, to poverty, hunger, healthcare costs, if we, as a group, apply effectively what we're doing. And we need to be responsible about the individual environmental impact of the unit. But the biggest thing that we need to do is cut the waste, improve the efficacy of what we're doing. And then I think that will be the most significant environmental impact of what we do.
Great. And another question we received is, this person assumes that the energy storage is by capacitors, and if so, how long can the tag operate with the Wi-Fi to recharge the capacitor?
Yeah, that's correct. So we have a tiny capacitor, one built into the chip, and one at the moment that augments the chip. It's still smaller than a credit card in terms of much thinner than a credit card. But we're talking about typically fractions of a second at the moment. So I think in the future, we'll have other solutions where we'll be able to harvest energy and be able to retain that energy for much longer. But now we're starting to get into future generations of our product. But at the moment, you're talking about continuous energizing to make the measurements that need to get measured, which means you need to have IoT infrastructure, a smart edge. If you want persistence of that energy, if you want that energy, that information to be logged, it needs to get logged either on the edge or in the cloud. That's probably the follow-on to the question.
Okay, great. Another question we have is, have you noticed any pushback in dealing with creating a more visible cold chain? We live in a skeptical world. So for example, have you heard of anyone questioning the validity of the time or temperature sensors, and how do you address concerns like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever you have a new technology, there's no shortage of skeptics. We haven't, I wouldn't say that this is one of the top problems that we have. You know, you can certify, and we've been getting third-party testing of our tags to show the accuracy of the temperature, and we have shown that we can achieve half a degree centigrade of accuracy with our version 2 product that's going to be launched. We had less than 1 degree centigrade of accuracy for version 1. And relative to the problem of something being left out unrefrigerated for 10 minutes, then either on a doorstep or a desktop or a bureau or a kitchen top, then accuracy really isn't the issue, although you obviously have to play by the rules. You need to work with NIST calibrated devices and so forth. I think the issues are more systemic, which is who's willing to take responsibility for these temperature excursions. It's, for a pharmaceutical company, knowing that their product has been ruined because someone's fridge stopped working is not really their problem. And so I personally think it's going to be the insurance companies that drive adherence to an adoption of this technology, because they're the ones where the buck stops. Literally, they're paying the bill when this stuff doesn't work. And everyone in between, they're good people. They want to do the right thing, but the logistics companies, they don't want to know when the temperature excursion has happened. Maybe they do want to prove it that they've done the right thing. But you tend to get into some difficult situations when you look at who's being blamed for what. Ultimately, I'm optimistic. Insurance rates will go down, wastage will go down, efficacy will go up. But I think this is going to be driven by the integrated healthcare providers and the insurance companies to make us all play nicely together.
Great, thank you. Another, just clarification to the beacon one, they're saying by using beacons as part of the process, they meant using those smart labels for making location-based searching through the hospital, for instance.
Yes, probably requires more discussion, but we see the smart tags as being complementary to an iBeacon, the Apple format. There's many battery-powered beacons, and those beacons can actually be a relay for the broadcast from our tags. Our tags broadcast a weaker signal than one that comes from a large battery-powered device. And so the battery-powered devices can actually listen and relay what we broadcast to connection points like Wi-Fi access points. So I think we're selling another tool in the kit bag. Sometimes people want to pit us against the legacy or the existing battery-powered beacon market, which I still think has a major role to play, has different strengths and weaknesses. And so we have a question of, is a screwdriver better than a hammer? And the fact is we need both. And ideally, when we're constructing solutions, we can use both in a complementary manner.
Thank you. Another question we have is, are there any memory specs or limitations that can be written on or encoded?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We are, these smart labels were born in the era of cloud connectivity. And so our approach has been to do the association between the Wiliot ephemeral ID, that's what we call our unique identifier that's burnt into the chip at the time that it's manufactured. That gets mapped to the SGTIN or whatever the serialization code is in the cloud. And so all of the history data that relates, it's unlike RFID, conventional RFID, where this is burnt onto the tag and you have to worry about memory requirements. The encryption keys and the ID and the ROM code that's running on these tags is what gets burnt on once at the beginning in a secure manner. And then all of the history is accumulated either in an edge device, if you're in a container that's being shipped across the sea, or in a shipping vehicle, or it gets routed through to the cloud, which is where all of the remapping of data and the temperature history gets stored.
Great, and we'll end on this question, Steve. And this person said, not sure if you can answer this, but when creating new products like the tags mentioned, how important is it to keep tabs on the standards out and being developed that may have an impact on the tag's usefulness?
Oh, yeah, I think it's hugely important. So we're hugely enthusiastic about the functionality here, but this doesn't happen with us as a company working on our own. It only happens if you can join things up with a broader ecosystem of converters and IoT vendors, tag assemblers, software developers. And I went back and again on the importance of multiple use cases, and also the importance of sharing data. Insurers, patients, hospitals, clinicians, there's a lot of events and information that needs to be shared. And so I think standards are hugely important. We are very interested in EPCIS as one of the GS1 standards that I think has had a lot of lip service, but has huge utility in exchanging information, event information on temperature excursions, compliance, usage, consumption. And so extending that standard and opening it up and having more free exchange of information and events is going to be really critical. And so I think there's probably new standards and development of existing standards, particularly those from GS1, that I think will be very important in seeing the real economies and savings and increases in efficacy that are within our grasp.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, Steve, for your time and insights today. Greatly appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure and a privilege. Thanks everyone for joining, and some great questions.